3.7 million years ago, the African savanna was not ruled by humans but by fear. The ground trembled with the roars of saber-toothed predators, and every sunrise was a gamble between life and death. Yet, amid the dust and danger, something extraordinary stirred within a small group of early humans, a spark of empathy. When one among them fell, the others didn't flee. They hesitated, turned back, and faced the beast together. This moment, primitive, fragile, yet profoundly human, would change the course of evolution forever. For the first time, survival wasn't just about strength or speed. It was about saving each other. The land was not gentle. It stretched endlessly beneath a sun that burned without mercy. A wilderness where survival was a sacred ritual, and the wind carried whispers of both birth and death. Among the tall grasses and scattered stones of what we now call Africa, the earth itself seemed alive, breathing through the rhythm of the creatures that roamed it. Here, two ancient souls once walked together, bound by something far older than time itself. They were not yet human in the way we know humanity today. Their faces were raw, their hands rough, their language limited to gestures and sounds, but their hearts carried a silent knowing, an ancient memory of belonging. They had once been together, long before flesh took form. Perhaps as twin sparks in the cosmos, or as echoes of the same divine breath. But fate, that unseen sculptor of all journeys, had scattered them into different forms, testing the endurance of their connection. One was a hunter, nimble, cautious, born with the instinct to protect. The other was a gatherer, gentle, attuned to the rhythms of the earth, able to sense danger long before it arrived. Together they navigated a world of predators and primal hunger. The nights were their sanctuary. Under the endless canopy of stars, they would sit close, firelight flickering across their faces. In the silence, something ancient stirred within them, a feeling they couldn't name, yet one that transcended the fear that ruled their days. It was not yet love as we define it, but a deep recognition, a pull that defied the boundaries of survival. When the wind blew across the plains, it carried the same melody they had once known in another life, a song of reunion whispered by the universe itself. But the savannah was merciless. One day, as the pair foraged near a watering hole, danger crept upon them. A predator emerged from the tall grass, massive, patient, lethal. Instinct screamed for them to run, but something greater held them still. When the beast lunged, the hunter pushed the gatherer aside, taking the full weight of fate's strike. Blood stained the earth, and the moment became eternal, a testament to the first act of selflessness in the human story. As the life left his body, their eyes met. No words, no cries, just the quiet exchange of a promise carried through time itself. We will meet again. The gatherer wept, her tears blending with the dust, her spirit echoing into the unseen realms where souls wander and wait. And they did meet again. Across ages, across forms, across the shifting sands of existence, they found each other. Sometimes as lovers, sometimes as friends, sometimes as mere strangers whose eyes met for a heartbeat that felt like eternity. Each encounter a reminder of that first act beneath the African sun, the moment when survival gave birth to sacrifice, and sacrifice became the seed of what we now call love. It was in that harsh, unforgiving world that the human heart first learned its truest rhythm. After that fateful day beneath the African sun, something unseen began to awaken within the hearts of early humans, a quiet ripple that would one day become a wave shaping the destiny of humankind. It began not in the mind, but in the soul. When one being turned back to face danger for another, a sacred code was written into the invisible memory of life itself. That code was empathy, the silent bridge between one soul and another, the thread that connected all living things. The gatherer, now alone, carried that spark within her. The loss of the hunter was not the end, but a transformation. In her grief, she began to sense his presence not as a ghost, but as a vibration in the wind, a warmth in the firelight, a voice hidden within the sounds of the night. Each time she looked into the eyes of her tribe, she felt his echo, reminding her that no soul truly disappears. What was once instinct began to evolve into emotion. And emotion became the language of the heart, the first step toward what we now call humanity. Ages passed. The earth shifted, species changed, and the two ancient souls began their long journey through lifetimes. They met again in different forms, sometimes born under different suns, sometimes separated by oceans or centuries, but the memory of that first act of compassion was the invisible magnet that drew them together. Each reunion was a lesson, each separation a test. Through them, empathy evolved from a fleeting impulse into a sacred force, the essence of connection. In one life, they were wanderers in the desert, sharing the last drops of water in a drought that tested their endurance. In another, they were healers tending to the wounds of others, feeling pain that wasn't their own yet carrying it as if it were. With every lifetime the same pattern repeated. One would fall, the other would return. And in that return, the universe learned something profound, that love was not a human invention, but a cosmic inheritance. As consciousness expanded, so did the depth of their bond. What began as survival became sacrifice. What began as protection became compassion. Their spirits were teaching creation itself how to care, how to feel, how to see the divine in the other. The gatherer's sorrow from that ancient life became the seed of understanding in all those that followed. From it grew art, tenderness, the longing to heal, and the courage to forgive. And even now, millions of years later, that same vibration hums within us. When we reach out to comfort another, when we pause to protect rather than destroy, we are reliving the memory of those two ancient souls, the first to choose love over fear. For empathy is not merely an emotion. It is the soul remembering itself through another. And through every lifetime, in every act of kindness, those two still meet forever, finding each other in the eyes of humanity. Time moved like a slow tide, carrying the memory of those first humans into the vast ocean of history. What was once a single act of sacrifice began to echo through generations, etched into bone, gesture, and instinct. The spark of empathy became something more tangible, something visible in the choices of early tribes who began to risk their lives not only for themselves, but for one another. Archaeologists now find traces of this awakening in the silent evidence left behind. Healed fractures, cared for elders, signs that someone stayed behind to protect, to feed, to tend. But beneath the science lies a deeper story, one that the earth remembers in its quiet, eternal pulse. Among those echoes live the two ancient souls, still bound by the memory of that first loss on the savannah. Now, in another lifetime, they were born again as members of a small wandering tribe. The hunter had returned as a child, curious, tender, with eyes that held the memory of distant stars. The gatherer, reborn as the tribe's caretaker, carried a strange knowing, as though she recognized something timeless in that boy's gaze. She would often find him watching the horizon, as if waiting for something or someone beyond sight. The tribe lived in a world still ruled by predators, where every dusk brought the sound of unseen eyes circling the edges of firelight. One evening, as the tribe prepared to move, a child strayed too far into the tall grass. A scream pierced the air, a sound of pure terror. The old instincts of flight surged through the group, but before thought could settle, the boy ran toward the sound. The caretaker followed, her heart seized by something ancient and familiar. There, they found the child cornered by a great beast, its shadow vast under the dying sun. The boy stood between the predator and the helpless child, trembling but unmoving, his small frame defying every rule of survival. When the caretaker reached him, time itself seemed to pause. She saw not a boy, but the soul she had once lost, the soul that had once stood the same way, under the same sun, countless ages ago. Without hesitation she lifted a burning branch, shouting, waving, summoning courage from a place older than fear. Together they faced the beast, and together they survived. That night, as the tribe gathered in silence, something shifted. They began to see one another not as competitors for survival, but as parts of a greater whole. For the first time, courage was not measured by strength, but by compassion. The boy looked up at the caretaker, And though words had not yet been born, a truth passed between them. They had fulfilled an ancient promise. And so, across lifetimes, their story became humanity's story, a tale written in the marrow of our being. The moment we chose to protect instead of flee, we stepped beyond instinct. We began to remember who we truly are, souls learning, again and again, how to love through the language of survival. The savannas that once shaped bone and instinct slowly gave way to forests, rivers, and villages. Firelight became hearthlight. The world of survival began to evolve into something far deeper, a realm where the soul began to remember itself through relationship, through belonging. The instinct to save one another had now become a choice, an awareness, a conscious devotion. Evolution was no longer just sculpting bodies. It was shaping the unseen, the emotional and spiritual fabric of what it meant to be human. The two ancient souls, bound through endless lifetimes, were reborn once again. This time not as hunter and gatherer, nor as protector and caretaker, but as equals, two wanderers in a growing world where humanity had begun to speak, dream, and wonder. They met in a small community near the bend of a river, where people had started to tell stories around the fire, stories of ancestors, spirits, and stars. From the first glance, they knew each other. Not in the mind, not even in the heart, but in that timeless silence within the soul that whispers, "Here you are again." Their bond was different now. It was not born of danger, nor tested by survival. It existed in a gentler space, one where cooperation, trust, and shared understanding were beginning to define the rhythm of life. Together, they taught their tribe something new, the art of caring not just for the living, but for the sick, the aging, and the fallen. They began to see that life was not a competition for existence, but a tapestry of connection. When one among them was injured, the tribe no longer moved on without them. They stayed. They shared food, offered warmth, protected one another in turns. This was the dawn of collective survival, the moment when empathy transformed into wisdom, when love became strategy. In that sacred transformation, humanity began to evolve not just biologically, but spiritually. The soul, once fragmented by fear, began to remember its wholeness through acts of compassion. The two souls felt this change deeply. They could sense the invisible current that flowed between people, the shared pulse of life that made each heart beat in quiet unison. At night, they would sit by the river, watching the moon ripple on the water's surface. "Do you feel it?" One would ask, and the other would nod, sensing not the wind, but the energy of a greater consciousness awakening. The same energy that once made a mother protect her child now moved entire communities to care for strangers. Through them, humanity began to understand that strength was never the absence of vulnerability, it was the courage to remain open in the face of pain. And from that understanding, something divine emerged, the awareness that we are one living organism, breathing through countless forms, remembering one eternal truth. Empathy had redefined evolution. No longer driven by instinct alone, humans were now guided by something higher, an inner knowing that to protect another was to protect oneself. And in that knowing, the two souls found each other once more, not as survivors, but as teachers of love disguised as humans. As the ages turned and the earth shifted beneath the feet of evolving tribes, something luminous began to awaken within the human heart. It was faint at first, a flicker behind the eyes, a warmth beneath the ribs, but it grew stronger with every act of kindness, every moment of connection that defied the cold logic of survival. It was compassion, the unseen flame that would one day light the path of civilization. And at the center of this unfolding, as if woven into the design of time itself, were two souls whose story had quietly guided the world toward remembering love. They had walked the savannah together, faced death together, and returned through lifetimes, carrying within them the seed of empathy that would blossom into the first glimmers of humanity's divine nature. Now, in a new age, they met again, no longer as primitive wanderers, but as early humans gathered around a fire, gazing into the night sky. The stars above shimmered like old memories, and as they sat side by side, an unspoken recognition passed between them. They had been here before. Different bodies, different names, same souls. The man told stories of the constellations, how each light in the heavens mirrored a soul on earth. The woman listened, her eyes reflecting the firelight, feeling that the stars themselves were listening too. In that moment, something eternal stirred between them, not passion, not desire, but remembrance. They were not simply two individuals bound by fate. They were symbols of what humanity was becoming. Through their countless reunions, the universe was teaching itself how to love through form. One evening, a great storm swept across the plains. Lightning tore the sky, and the wind howled through the grasslands. As fear rippled through the camp, she took his hand, an instinct older than words, and in that touch, calm spread among them all. The tribe felt it too, the steady reassuring pulse of unity. It was as if the storm outside mirrored the chaos within, and their connection became a reminder that peace was not found in the absence of fear, but in the courage to hold one another through it. That was the moment compassion took root as something sacred. It was no longer just an emotional impulse, it became a spiritual truth. Through these souls, humanity began to learn that love was not weakness, but the ultimate strength. That to care for another was to remember the divine thread connecting all life. As time moved forward, their story continued to echo in mothers soothing children, in strangers helping one another, in the silent tenderness that passes between eyes that recognize each other beyond this life. The two ancient souls had fulfilled their purpose. They had taught humanity how to love beyond blood, beyond survival, beyond the limits of one lifetime. And even now, when we choose compassion over cruelty, when we turn back to help instead of run, their story lives again. It whispers through our actions, reminding us that love is not something we learn, it's something we remember.